Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about in this chapter is an array list. Now, an array list is probably the best way to utilize an array. Um, there's actually a lot. The CIS 250 class gets into data structures, and that's basically where you start covering a lot more powerful ways to structure data and not utilize an array. An array is kind of, think of it as a kind of an old school kind of a way to group data together, where an array list is kind of now getting us into that new age of Java programming. Probably the best way to demonstrate is let's just actually go to the code. So here's what I've done is we have array list. Now that is an object. Okay, so I'm creating an array list object. Now you'll notice I've got these less than greater than signs, and inside of there I have a data type. So what I'm saying is I'm creating a string array list. I'm going to call that array list a name list. I'm going to instantiate it as a new array list that's string, and notice I have nothing in there because I'm not giving it any data. Now the great thing, probably the most powerful thing between an array and array list is I can add things to the list and I can remove things from the list. Pretty cool stuff. We can do the same thing in an array, but there's a lot more manual work that's done. So here I'm actually saying the name list, which is my array, dot add James, dot add Catherine, dot add Bill. Okay, there's no indexing there, there's none of that. I'm just saying add, and that's exactly what it did. And then I say the array list has, and I say name list, and a parameter is a size. It's like a length. It's just like length, and it says size, and that tells me how many items are in that how many elements are in that array list. And then I can do the same exact thing with an array list as I do with an array. I say for int index equals 0, so I'm creating an index. While the index is less than the name list.size, notice it's got a left and right parenthesis behind it because we can actually type parameters in there. So it's very important we do that. I'm going to increase my index by 1, and then I go ahead and say namelist.get. Notice I don't have an index. I don't have the index in the square brackets. I say get, and then inside the parentheses of the get, I'm telling it what position I want, starting at 0, going all the way up. So if I were to run this, it says the array list has 3 objects stored in it: James, Catherine, and Bill. So I've got add, I've got .get. Those are 2 methods built into that object. Okay, again, we're kind of getting into some object-oriented stuff here, but again, you're not quite understanding what's going on there. So realize we've got this object that has its own fields and methods built in. If we take a look at the next one, same exact thing. The array list string name list is an instantiate is a brand new one, and I'm adding James, Catherine, and Bill. Again, I'm saying how many objects are in it, and then now notice I'm using the new way, and this is probably the more preferred way of a for loop to use. I'm going to create, every time I go through this, I'm creating a brand new string variable called name. I'm going to take each element, start at the very first one, and throw it into this name variable. So first time through it's going to have James, second time through name's going to have Catherine, third time through it's going to have Bill. So notice the difference between this one and this for loop. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on here, where here very streamlined, very clean. And again, we're going to get the same exact results if we run this, and voila, the array list has 3 objects stored in it: James, Catherine, and Bill. Okay, so again, probably this is the more preferred way to basically execute that. We don't have to create any indexes. We don't have to basically say, while it's less than that. This just starts at 1 and goes all the way through to the end. That's all it does. So very, very clean. If we go to the third one, same exact thing, create an array list string. Now this could be a double, it could be an integer, it could be whatever the case may be, whatever data type you're needing. Just realize you can do that. I'm adding James, Catherine, Bill. It has 4, so now I'm using a for loop. I'm using the old style for loop, and I'm saying the index name. So I'm basically saying get the name. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to print the name with the index that it basically is associated with that. Then I come in and I say nameless.remove, a new method, and I'm telling it to remove the number 1 position. So remember, we got 0, 1, and 2 in this case. And then the item at index 1 is now removed. Here are the items now, and I go through that same exact for loop again. Now the size is going to change. When I do a remove, the size is going to change from 3 down to 2. So now if I run this, index 0 is James, index 1 is Catherine, index 2 is Bill. The item index 1 is removed. Here are the names now. Index 0 is now James, index 1 is now Bill. Okay, so very, very powerful. Allows us to remove and add and get different elements. Whoop. I didn't want to run that. Let me go ahead and open it. So if we open up number 4, same exact thing, except identical up to this point. Instead of doing a remove, we do an add. So I've created my name list up here with the add, and just midstream I add another one. But what's this number 1 does? Let's see. So if I run this, well, I just ran it down here, notice that this 1 represents the index number. I told to add Mary at the number 1 position. So what was that number 1 now gets pushed to number 2. So in this case, the index 2 name is Bill, and that's Bill used to be, let me scroll up a little bit. Catherine used to be 1, Catherine is now 2. Okay, that makes sense. So James was 0, Catherine was 1, Bill was 2. I had Mary at the number 1 position. James is still 0, Mary is now 2, Catherine is 2, and Bill is number 3. So we've seen add up here, but we can use add midstream as well, and I can tell it in what position I want to basically do that. So in a sense, what we could do is I could remove somebody at this index and then turn right around and add somebody new at that same position. We take a look at number 5, and so same exact thing, create an array list. It's a string array list. I add these 3 names. I go ahead and print out index and the name, and then I say set 1 as Becky. Catherine's now placed by Becky. So what I said just a few seconds ago is I said remove somebody at that position and then turn around and add them. Or we can use the set method. The set says take that position and set it to a new name. So in this case, I'm saying take position 1 and replace it with the name Becky. So if we run this, there we have James at the 0 position, Catherine at the number 1 position, Bill at the number 2 position. And then it says Catherine was replaced with Becky. I don't know why we say Catherine there. Here are the items now. James is 0, Becky is 1, Bill is 2. So set. So instead of doing that in 2, doing a remove and then an add, I could just do a set and replace the data that's there. So add, get, set, remove. So all methods within the um, array list class. So now there is a demo 6, but again that uses the object-oriented stuff. So basically, if you want to look at it, you can, but realize that's saved more for chapter, or I should say, CIS 155. So. Page 45 talks about common errors to avoid. So this is the entire chapter, so it's basically last week and this week. Using invalid subscript. Basically make sure you avoid that. Don't try to go outside or inside. Or I should say, don't try not going outside of what the range is for a. You always stay within the dot length or the dot size. Confusing the contents of an integer array element with another element's subscript. So if you're using an integer data type that's an element, try not to get it confused with the integer of the index. Causing an off by 1 error. Realize you're starting at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means you've now got 6 elements. So don't get confused by that. Using the equal operator to copy an array. Remember, when you copy an array, all you've done is just given that array a new name. That's all it's done. You're still pointing to the same array. So to do a true copy, you have to do it manually. Use the double equal sign to compare two arrays. Reversing the row and column scripts when processing a two-dimensional array. Yeah, don't get those flip-flop. Realize the outer loop, I should say, is the row, and the inner loop is the column. And if you always kind of keep that in the back of your mind, you always basically going from there. So the last video lecture of this quarter. Next week is the final exam. It will basically be over what we've covered in the second half of this quarter, and pretty much just like the midterms. Again, if you have any questions, email me, call me, text me. All the information is on my contact. We'll see you guys at the final.